Welcome to Bound by Books. I'm Marianne Maria. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romance, and paranormal romantic suspense, and all of the things that go bump in the night that make us shiver and shake and love to love. And today I am joined by
Hi, I'm sci-fi romance author Tina Moss. I write all about alien pickles. We have a
today,
very specific brands.
yes, today we are discussing writing myths
Oh,
and
I'm
the
excited about this one. It's
Yeah,
gonna
me
be fun.
too. The ones that we've all fallen prey for to over the years, and the you musts of writing that are myths because we all just kind of trip over those roots from time to time and need to pick ourselves up from the dry leaves and dust ourselves off and continue on our path. So I'm
Exactly.
going to hand it over to Tina and let her kick it off. And
Awesome.
here we go.
So before we dive into our top 10, let me ask you, what are you working on right now, Marianne? Is there any projects in the works?
Uh, no, right now I'm a little bit on hiatus. I am in the process of doing deep dives into existing works and how to either edit them or rebrand them or um, making sure that the genres are correct. And, Tina, you are going to be helping me with that. And anybody who's watching this on YouTube, if I move my head and you happen to see a foot show up, it's because I have a graphic there. It's not, I don't have a foot growing out of my head. It's just a graphic. So
It's a really pretty graphic though. So if you're listening on another platform, you have to come over and give us a watch on YouTube. Marianne
yeah,
also has her beautiful cover besides the lady with the feet. So
yeah,
you'll have to come see
it's
both.
a woman laying down reading her book on her Kindle and her feet are up on the wall. And it just so happens that her foot sticks up over my head. So
I
anyway,
like that background though. It's really great. Yeah, I
yeah.
took a little bit of a hiatus too. I wasn't originally planning on it. I was planning on having Aliens Hope out by now, but life kind of got in the way, so I decided to go ahead and release a novella that I had in a charity anthology that's actually going to be the prequel and kind of the launch to my next sci-fi series. They're all interconnected. But I was originally going to release this one later, but because I couldn't get Aliens Hope out, I decided to release Aliens Getaway. So that'll come out probably in about a week or so. And I'm going to give it away free. It's already free from my patrons because they get early access, but I'm going to give it to my author group and my newsletter. So just a subtle plug, if you'd like to get a free novella, you can come on over for that. So
That sounds amazing.
yeah, it's fun. All right. That's out of the way. Let's dive on into these top 10 writing myths. So the first one, which ironically enough, we're talking about during NaNoWriMo, I find a little amusing, is you must write every day. Marianne, as a published author, must you write every day?
I used to think that, and I used to chastise myself for it. And then I reached the dreaded block. And there are
Oof.
some authors out there who say writer's block doesn't exist. It's a money. It's a job. You can't just have a block from your job. Well, you
You're
know what? When
jumping
you
ahead. You're jumping ahead. That's later.
well, um, and the dreaded burnout when you
Mhm.
write every day, when you say you have to write every day, yeah, you can, write down your thoughts, or if you have a couple of ideas so you don't lose them, because we've talked in the past, that you could just kind of jot down those little notions and inspirations that hit you is fine. But actually having to sit and grind every day, like you have to write
Mhm.
3,000, 5,000, 10,000 words a day. I don't believe that, because if you hold your feet to the fire for that on days when life is just throwing shit at you, excuse my
Right.
language, all right, that when life is just throwing curveballs, I will be more
Yeah.
polite. Um, you will reach burnout, and and eventually you will start to resent your craft. And
And that's
nobody
the
wants to
worst.
do that, is
Yeah.
to resent your craft. So, I don't believe that anymore. I believe that yes, you have to write. Yes, you have to do your job.
Hmm.
If you're not productive, you're not gonna put books out, you're not gonna make money, you're not gonna satisfy your readers, and readers are fickle. They'll move on to the next thing, the next author, because they're not gonna wait around for you. I mean, it's just,
Hmm.
they may be happy when you put something back out, but at that point in time, you're not the hot new thing.
Right.
So, you know, it's somewhere between treadmill or better yet, hamster wheel, and writing when the spirit moves you. Somewhere, if you
Yeah.
find somewhere in between, you'll be good. So at
I
least
think
that's
the
my
whole
opinion.
writing everyday thing is kind of, it depends, right? I think it's good to develop a daily habit, right?
Yes.
I think that if you've never written before, or you're not a professional writer, you're just kind of beginning this journey, I think it can be a motivation to get you into a good habit. But I think if you take it too far, like for me, for example, I use this all the time. I have learned over a decade now that I am not a write everyday person. I am a binge writer. I never would have believed it, but if I looked back on my old patterns and really did like an analysis on it, I would have realized that I am a binge writer. There are
Yes.
seasons where I write and there are seasons where I don't. Um,
Yes.
and also, I think it's important to remember that a lot of what you do that you not putting on the page is also part of the creative writing process, brainstorming,
Right.
taking a walk and thinking about your characters or your plot, kind of like internally doing those things without necessarily putting stuff on the page. It's great if you can, but there's all of these things kind of behind the scenes that can happen that is not necessarily, putting the words down. So
I think
all of
I,
that is part of the process.
I think that's very true. And I think you and I both know that if you don't court that in your
Mm-hmm.
life, and when I mean court, I mean actually invite those moments of inspiration and court the muse is basically what I
Mm-hmm.
was talking about, because going for those walks, or standing in the shower and closing your eyes and just letting the sound of the water roar on the tile around you, that helps put you in that kind of creative channel, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just you and no one else. And that roar of that water is,
Yeah.
it's almost like, it puts you trance like, at least it does for me, where it just everything just kind of uh speaks to the creative process.
Right.
If you don't do that, then you're going to be sitting in front of your laptop with your hands on your keyboard, just staring at a blinking cursor with nothing to
Yeah.
write. And it's important that you have to make time for that process. And when I said before that, jotting down, writing every day, jotting down ideas or inspiration and everything, that kind of speaks to what you were just talking about,
Mm-hmm.
that walk and that time to just let ideas sprout, let ideas kind of
Yeah.
grow.
And it's
And
it's like decompressive. It's kind of like you said, like a meditative thing where you just like
yes,
are letting
yes,
your brain just kind of
play.
loosely think about these things and
Yeah,
play. That's a great
yeah,
word. We don't use
yeah.
that enough.
Letting your brain play. Because I
That's
think
awesome.
when you're a creative, whether it's writing or music or acting or
Art.
any kind
Hmm.
of the arts, or the fine arts or what have you, your brain needs to play, because if it doesn't play, it'll stagnate.
That's great advice. So let's move on to number two, because this one this one took me a long time to learn. Your
Yeah.
writing needs to be perfect. Yeah.
That that was me blowing a raspberry for people who are just listening in.
I
That was
hate
not.
that word. I hate
Yeah,
the word perfect. Oh my God. What a complete just disaster to any creative endeavor. This idea of perfection.
yeah,
I
I
I
agree.
lived my life for way too long being a perfectionist, and it stunted my growth. It stunted my abilities as a
Yeah.
writer. It made me second guess myself. It gave me imposter syndrome to the extreme. I
Oh,
would over edit to the point where I had like double digits of drafts of a book and
yeah.
would never want to publish it. It was awful. It was the absolute worst. So now my mantra is I strive to be done.
Well, you and I are the ones who are the bastions of the hostage deadline. So being perfect sometimes is, I think it's the bane of the creative process, because we all want it. We all want our
Mm-hmm.
words to just hit that tone and to hit that the heart of our readers and so forth, but at the same time be 100% grammatically correct with absolutely no typos whatsoever and no missed commas and and no missed words and so forth. But
Right.
you know, there's a difference. You can have your words be perfect, but at the same time, um
Not be
You can
impactful.
not be impactful, or at
Hmm.
the same time, um, taking too long to worry about the minutia, that you lose the thread of the story,
Yeah.
and the story kind of just gets in that messy middle and just dies,
I've
and
I've reached the point now too where I've kind of made it like an interactive experience with my readers, and that like yes, I want it to be as polished as I can get it,
yeah,
but I
we all
also
do.
want to get it out. I want it to be in the hands of readers. So at the end of all of my books, I kind of give a like a little message to my readers saying, "Hey, like grammar gremlins could have gone through this book. If you spot any, email me and let me know." And some of them that they spotted have been absolutely hilarious. Like
Yeah,
we've gotten a good laugh over it, and they help make my books better. But it's almost it's taking me from this perspective of like I need to have this perfect thing that I have bequeathed upon the reader to no, I'm human and readers are allowed to know that and we can have a fun interaction for, a
right,
mistake in a book.
right. I mean, if you think about it, there are so many other ones. Sherry and I, our other host, have touched on it, like, not using ly adverbs,
Isn't
and
that silly?
that's lazy writing,
That's so
and
silly.
and the gerund forms, like, was running, was,
It's
was running, was playing, was kissing, that type of thing. That it's lazy writing, and you know you have to understand that there are mechanics of writing that
mhm.
you need to hone, but at the same time, you open up a book from any of the the top New York Times best-selling fiction authors, and you're going to find
Right.
ly adverbs, you're going to find you
Well,
know
it's so
gerund forms
silly.
of verbs. It's just
This
it's
idea that we can't use parts of the English language, like it's there. Words, matter. We can
right.
use them in correct ways, and
Let's
not everything has to be, purple prose or flowery language. Sometimes you were just running.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yes.
yeah.
I guess it's there's fresh writing, and there's get the job done writing, which are terms I learned from Margie Lawson, and I absolutely
I
love
love
that
that.
woman as a mentor. So, and it's you have to just make sure that your writing is not amateurish
Mm-hmm.
and professional, but at the same time, and you, when neither Tina nor I are advocating not editing your book. You have to
No.
have your book edited, you have to have your book proofread, but at the same
Yes.
time, you cannot tie yourself up in knots if all of a sudden you, after the book is out, you find a typo. And I have to
Right.
say that's one of the beautiful things about being an indie author, is that if you do find something, or
Quick
somebody
change.
brings something to your attention, you can change it. It's
Exactly.
not something that, but then if you're a trad pub author and somebody finds something, it's not on you, it's on them. So,
Right.
what are you going to do? You're going to be the one who's going to be excoriated online by the grammar Nazis,
Yeah.
and the typo Nazis. But at the same time, you know, it's not something that you should beat yourself up about,
Exactly.
if there's just a few, just a few.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want your whole book littered with them. You still want to have
No,
it.
no, no, no. There
You
has
still
to
want
be
to
a
have a good book.
It's like anything in life. There has to be a healthy balance.
Nice.
So,
All right. Number three. I kind of this one might be a little controversial. All
oh,
writing must be original. This is
okay.
tricky. This is a tricky one.
Yes, it
Because
is. It's
yes,
definitely
and also no.
okay. We need to qualify this.
Yes.
Okay. Because we are in no way, shape, or form advocating
Advocating.
plagiarism.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
You do not take somebody else's book, and just because the hero was driving a blue truck, make it a red truck and think that, oh, now it's mine. No, you don't do that. All right. You don't
Right.
change the names in a story and think, okay, now it's mine. No, you don't do that. What Tina and I are alluding to is that, like, a perfect example for me being a paranormal author, okay, I do write vampires. Okay. There
Mm-hmm.
is vampire mythology. All right. And there have been hundreds, and if not thousands, of different takes on vampire mythology.
Probably
It's
hundreds of thousands.
yes, so what we're saying is that ideas, there are the hundred. I mean, think about how many romances. All right, we're coming
Mm-hmm.
into the holiday season. Think about Hallmark movies. Okay, the Christmas movies. Okay, think about how many of them have been reiterated and done again, and just with the with slightly different twists and so forth. You know,
Right.
I think maybe instead of all writing being original, is all themes are not exactly original.
Right.
So
I would say that this is not a myth in the sense all writing must be original. Yes, it must be in your voice, your words from your brain,
right,
right? But on the flip side of that, there is common themes,
right,
tropes, genre expectations,
right,
retellings of
exactly.
previously like public domain stories. Like let's say Beauty and the Beast, for example, is a
Yeah,
perfect one, right? How many times has that been retold?
yeah,
Or Persephone in Hades is very hot right
yeah.
now.
Pride, Prejudice,
So
and Zombies.
yeah, so things, as long as it's in public domain, you can do a retelling. And you may have situations where you have authors that you love and you are influenced by them. But as long as you are not copying them,
Right,
right? That's the difference. It's inspiration versus plagiarism.
right,
It's your voice and your words versus taking somebody else's and changing a few things around. Like
right,
that's not okay. So
right,
yes, original voice, original style, original words, but also you can have themes, tropes, genre expectations, etc., that are the
right.
same.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, is the
Yeah.
themes, that there are 100 different variations, and I'm using 100 in a loose terminology, variations on theme,
Yeah.
and you, as long as you make it your own, no one can turn around and say to you, vampires being, incinerated by sunlight. Oh, how unoriginal. Well,
How dare
it's,
you steal that?
yeah, yeah. How dare you steal that from Bram Stoker? You know what I mean? No, it's like it's it's kind of like there are
Right.
certain rules to mythology that you keep, and then, but if
Mhm.
you don't want to, you don't have to. I mean, look at Stephanie Meyer. I mean, hers didn't explode in sunlight. They sparkled. So that was a different take.
Right.
Original twist on a tried and true theme.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the fact that the trope in that series was a love triangle. How many love
Mm-hmm.
triangles have there been? How many second chance romances have there been? So
Yep.
that's what we're saying. All writing must be original. I think
Yeah.
it has to be your take on it, and a tried and true theme, tried and true trope, and tried and true mythology.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. Number 4, and you were getting into this a little bit before, so
Oh
this
my
is
god,
going to be
that
a
that
fun
last
one.
one just made me sweat a little bit.
I know. Well, it's been hot too. November, it's been so warm. But okay, number 4. Writer's block isn't real.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna blow another raspberry at that.
I'm actually going to have a different spin on this, so I'm going to let you go first.
Okay,
So writer's block isn't real. What do you think?
I had couple of very well-heeled authors at an event tell me that it wasn't real. That writer's block isn't real, because writer's block is a job, and writing is a job, and that you have to do your job to get paid, and that it's just an excuse. Well,
Oh no.
I mean, unless you are writing formulaic, where you just kind of drag and drop, plug in, in the same formula of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's true for you, but
Mm-hmm.
if most people I know, most authors I know, if you have been on the hamster wheel, like I have put myself on the hamster wheel, now I need to take a little, take a little bit of a step back. Um, you you can get blocked. You can.
Mm-hmm.
Life throws curveballs at you. We all sometimes get sick in body. Sometimes we get fatigued in mind, and
Mm-hmm.
and writer's block happens. At least I think it does. And sometimes it's having to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm tired of this genre. It's
Yeah.
time for me to change lanes. It's time for
Mm-hmm.
me to give my brain palette a cleanse. To
Right. Or this book or this project isn't working. Mm-hmm.
right. Or
For
maybe
sure.
it's time to put it on the back burner and do something else.
Yeah.
Work on something else. Now what's your take?
So I'm going to put a caveat on this. I absolutely think writer's block is real, but I would say we use this as like a colloquial term for a umbrella of things. They could be creative burnout. It could be depression. It
Mm-hmm.
could be anxiety. It can be imposter syndrome. It can be things that are happening in your life that you don't even fully realize that are
Yes.
affecting your writing. So
Yes.
it's not so much that I don't believe writer's block isn't real. I absolutely do. I believe that the idea of writer's block as a single concept is not real. And I think it's really important to get to the root of what's causing the block for you to be able to get out of it and make sure that, again, I'm a big advocate for mental health, to make sure that you're doing all the things that you need to do to make sure that your mental health is in a good space.
Right. And I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, because and I think that's where people get tripped up, and it's like, oh, writer's block isn't a real thing. Absolutely it is. It's just this umbrella of various things that it could be. So in order to get out of it, make sure that you're identifying more specifically what's causing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the hiatus that I'm on right now is because I'm kind of in a little bit of a dark place with my writing and with a lot of other things in life, and I am struggling a little bit with purposefulness, and motivation, and where I am at this time in my life. And so it's it's half the battle is to be cognizant of the fact that something is wrong. The other half of that is to then, after you acknowledge that there's something wrong, is then to figure out a way to fix it. Don't just let it mire you. People end up, they're mired, and then they just become stuck and then become stagnant. And then before long, it's like you feel like you're in this giant hole that you can't get out of. And if you suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome, because all of us do it from time to time, you're like, oh my God, why, can I really do this? If you let yourself be mired, that imposter syndrome just grabs you by the throat and pulls you down even further, because then it's harder for you to get out of. So if you are feeling any of those things that Tina has mentioned, pat yourself on the back for acknowledging it, and then take the next step and talk to somebody, because that's not everybody is just, happy go lucky all the time. If people say that, they're lying.
In fact, I don't know anybody who is.
No.
I think, we all go through dark spots, through dark moments in our life, and making sure that we're acknowledging that. And we're not just, blaming our writer's block on like, oh, well, I'm just blocked. And you might be. It might just be a thing with the story that's not working, but make sure you're identifying exactly what it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's important. It's important. And that's all I have to say about that.
All right. Number 5, reading a lot. And I think we're going to have some opinions on this too. Reading a lot will make you a better writer.
I say yes. I think it's important to keep yourself fresh. I think it's important that you need to read, especially all different types of literature. I have 2 books on my nightstand right now. I have the original Pride and Prejudice, and I also have Strangely Beautiful by Leanna Renee Heber, who is an author friend of mine. So one is like PG rated Gothic, mystery, and the other one is Regency, classic literature. And it's reading Pride and Prejudice. I have to read it with a dictionary. You would think, being a writer, that my vocabulary would be so expansive, but I have to read it with a dictionary, because no matter how many times I've seen the movie and how many times I've perused, I want to qualify that, perused Pride and Prejudice, because it is mind numbing sometimes with the way that they write back in the day. So, but yes, I agree. I think, I agree that my opinion is that you need to read, because if anything, to keep your vocabulary fresh.
So here I go again. I'm going to have another caveat. Ready? So, little story. In my 20s, I was a martial artist for about 10 years. And my karate instructor had a saying. And he used to say, practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And I think this can be applied to a lot of different things. So if you are reading purely for pleasure, which there's nothing wrong with that at all, I do it all the time, you are going to become a better reader. You're not necessarily going to become a better writer, because, like you just said, you read Pride and Prejudice with a dictionary. Why? Because you are critically thinking about Pride and Prejudice. You're wanting to understand it more. So if you are reading with the idea in mind of becoming a better writer, or to figure out how books are constructed or to deconstruct works, things like that, then I think it can help you in writing. Certainly when I jumped into sci-fi romance, I tell the story all the time. I read over like 150 sci-fi romance books before I ever put pen to paper in this genre. Why? Because I wanted to understand the constructs of the genre. I wanted to know reader expectations, the different varieties of it. I really wanted to do a deep dive into the genre, and I absolutely enjoyed every minute of it, but I was also reading critically.
Yeah,
So I think
purposeful
that's
reading. Yeah.
purposeful reading. Exactly. So I think that's the difference there. I think any reading is fantastic, right? It's always going to make you better. It's going to open, your points of view, expand your mind, all of those things. But I think if you're doing it specifically to be a better writer, it's got to be critically done.
I agree. I can't argue with that. I can't argue with that at all, because when I see that, reading makes you a better writer, you're right. It's not just for enjoyment. It's
It was so nice if it was.
I know. I know.
It's so
I
much
mean, it's
easier.
not like it's through osmosis either, because if you get lost in the story and you're forgetting about tracking the beats, then you have to kind of go back and be, okay, what did I read? I know what I just read and I loved it, but now I got to go back and figure out why I loved
Right.
it.
How did they do this? How did the writer
Right.
get me there?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
and it's funny that because I was a martial artist too for 10 years. I
See,
have my first and second degree black belt.
I was
So
gonna say you're higher ranked than me though. So technically you're my senpai.
I am. I am. I
All
am. I
right,
actually
ready for number 6?
I
Oh wait, no,
am.
tell your
No,
story.
go ahead. It's fine. It's no big deal.
Number 6. Then this ties into what we were talking about. Real writers find writing easy.
Oh God.
Now, there's no caveats here. This is just pure myth.
It's called work for a reason. Hi ho,
writing can be a lot of
it's
things.
off to write I go. So, no.
When it's flowing, it can be enjoyable and fun and great. But man, when it's not, it is not easy.
No, man, no.
There's nothing easy about it.
Why do you think we all do the happy dance when we write the words "the end"? It's like and the end. Then the next day we stand and we look at our blinking cursors, going, "Okay, what do I do now?" So,
right. Yeah. I think like any kind of ability or skill, there can be some natural ability there. Like you think of an athlete, who's built for a certain sport. I think you can have an inclination for you, like when people talk about being very young and starting writing, or like winning awards in kindergarten kind of a thing. Like, yes, there can be some innate ability, but I don't think it's easy for anybody. And I think the same would be said for any profession. Nobody's going to just naturally, you don't wake up and become a doctor. You know what I mean?
no, I mean, it's the way I look at it is there's a difference between the word easy and the word fun. Okay. So is writing for writers, is writing fun? It's yeah,
Sometimes.
it is. Well, no, because think about it. If you didn't write for a living, would you still write? Most of us would say, yeah. Most of us would be like, you'd have stories, whether they were stories that you told or stories that just kind of occupied your mind, while you were, just kind of daydreaming, laying by the pool or sitting, laying down, trying to take a nap. They kind of spin in your head. There's nothing that is going to stop the creative mind from being creative. There just isn't. It's the way we're hardwired. And when we're writing, and like you said, when the words are really flowing, it is fun. It's fun. But when we hit that messy middle, when we're struggling with a conflict, or and I don't mean a conflict with that gets in the way of writing. I'm talking about conflicts in the book, emotional conflicts, mental conflicts, and physical, external conflicts for our characters. It can be very difficult to work that out. How many times have you seen online somebody say, how I just exhaled because I figured out a plot point. It's like we hold our breath when I'm writing, the same way we want our readers to hold their breath when they're reading our books. So yeah, fun does not equate to easy. Exactly. But at the same time, it is. We wouldn't do it if we didn't enjoy the work.
Agree. All right, number 7, and I decided to combine these two because I thought they were hilarious. One side, one myth, writers are poor, and the other side, writers are rich.
Well, you, you've ever heard of the term the 1%?
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
It's to the writer's world. And also it also really is, how do you qualify rich? How do you
That's a
qualify poor? You
That is
know?
a great point. If we're talking purely in a monetary sense, Stephen King, Nora Roberts, yes, they are James Patterson, they are rich, right? And if we're looking at somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck and just trying to make it in this world, yes, that's on the poor side. But that's purely financial perspective. I would say, from every other thing that matters in this world, writers are always rich in that sense, right? Because we're putting out our stories and we're doing something we love. From a very practical sense, there's not a great percentage of writers who are going to get to the point where they can make a living or a full-time income from their work. I think there's a reason why the Facebook group is called 20 books to 50K. That means having 20 books out to get to a $50,000 salary. There's
And that's
not
not always
a lot of other
guaranteed.
professions. No, not at all.
And not for anything, it's also, you have to qualify it, because a book that makes you, you know, earn, the equivalent of a full-time job on a monthly basis, whatever your full-time job salary would be, your cap would is 2,000, 4,000, 6,000, $10,000 a month, whatever. It, just because it's doing it one year doesn't mean that you're going to be earning that same caliber of level in the following year. It's
Exactly.
We live at the mercy of consumer whim,
Mm-hmm.
because what's hot and trending now won't be hot and trending next year or the year
Mm-hmm.
after that. So rich and poor need to be qualified, because I feel I am a rich person in the sense that I love every book that I have put out.
Mm-hmm.
Do I like love some of them a little more than others? Do I have a little bit of favorites in terms of ones that are nearer and dearer to my heart? I do. But that doesn't mean I love the other ones any less. Am I happy and proud that I have made readers happy? Do have when readers reach out to me and they tell me that they've loved this book, or that they had to read the book with a box of tissues next to it?
Oh.
Am I sorry I made them cry? Yeah. Am I sorry that my books reached them on such a visceral level that it evoked such a strong emotion? No, I'm happy. That
Yeah.
makes me happy that they've done that. My books have done that. So yeah.
It's hard to say. I think where
Yeah.
this comes into play is the myth of, the starving artist, that you must suffer for your art. And that's
No,
just not true.
no.
Authors deserve to be paid for their work. Point blank, period. Like, no arguments there. I will hear nothing on it. And on the other side, some people think, well, oh, you published a book, therefore you must be rich. Like, the two don't equate to each other at
No.
all.
And
So,
it's funny, I realized that when, I have a vast array of books in my office, and in boxes in my basement, and on bookshelves in my basement. And I have a finished basement, so it's not like they're stuffed away in a corner somewhere collecting dust. But
mhm,
um I have a book by Bonnie Vanek, and I have a series of books by Kathy Clamp.
mhm.
And they were Bonnie writes for, well, she did used to write for Harlequin. I don't know if she still does. And Kathy is a paranormal
I
romance
remember
author.
Kathy. Yeah.
And I remember seeing a post by Bonnie in Club Indie where she was looking for information, on editors, and that she would have to be able to talk to them at a different time when she wasn't at her day job. And I remember it hit me
Mm,
then. And then,
wow.
I ran into Kathy at an event, a writer's event, and we were talking about doing some kind of a reader, like a reader event at this
Mm-hmm.
convention that we were at. And she was concerned about how expensive it was going to be,
Sure.
because, and also that there was a day job involved. And I remember that's when it hit me in the face that
Yeah.
these were women whose books I absolutely loved and had on my bookshelves that I bought
Mm-hmm.
in bookstores, brick and mortar bookstores, Barnes and Noble,
And
and
still,
they
yeah,
still needed to have day jobs. Now, whether that's still the
absolutely.
case now, I don't know. I'm not speaking to that, but at the time, that's what it
Mm-hmm.
was, and I was just like, wow,
Stunned. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's an
stunned.
eye opener. But I think this ties really well into number 8. So if you're a good writer, you'll always succeed. You'll always be successful. I mean, it's very much a myth,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. And that's like what we said right before. Just because, a series or books that you write, hit one year doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hit the next time. And you may have the
Yeah.
first 3 books in your 6-book series or your 8-book series do very, very well. And then the rest of them kind of just fall off the cliff because people get, readers get reader fatigue, book, series fatigue, and they don't
Right.
want to read past book 3 or book 4.
And that's why I think it's really important to define what your measure of success is, right? Because that's going to be a different bar for everybody. And
Right.
if you're striving for something like being the next Stephen King or Nora Roberts or whatever, like that level, then you have to realize also that that is a long journey. That is a marathon. You are not going to have that with 1, 10, 20, 30, 40 out. These are people that have put out hundreds of books by this point to get to that level. And yes, there may be some success stories where you hear the one book or the debut author got the 6-figure advance, and that's great, but that is very rare and
It's a lightning
far
strike.
between. And I don't think that's something to strive for. If I don't, you don't strive to win the lottery. You
No.
strive to put out the best books you
Right.
can and to connect with your
I mean,
readers.
like we were talking about Stephanie Meyer before,
Mm-hmm.
her book, her Twilight series was that lightning strike, you know.
Absolutely.
Um,
She hit
Erica,
the right time.
E.L. James's 50 Shades of Grey, that was a
Mm-hmm.
lightning strike, you know, and and both women, are, they're commensurate writers, they're so, and they're amazing storytellers and
Mm-hmm.
marketing friggin' geniuses,
Mm-hmm.
so, it's they hit the trifecta, of
Exactly.
timing and trend and having a finger on the pulse of how to work that market,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. All right, next one. Number 9. This is another fun one. Write what you know.
Hmm.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough one
So I'm on
because
the yes and no fence again. I'm
yeah,
like,
me too.
yeah, kind of, but like for example, I have never met an alien to my knowledge. You know, I can't say that I've reached that level of conspiracy theory where I've met a 7-foot alien warrior. But at the same time, I did a ton of research on the genre, in a more serious way,
Right.
and I know that genre in and out now. Like I could give lectures on that genre. So when I write what I know, I definitely am well versed in the genre. But on the flip side of that, what I don't know, I believe you can write what you don't know, but you better do a lot of research, especially if you're writing like a minority character that's outside of your race or
Yeah.
sexuality
Yep.
or gender identity, etc. You better make sure that you've done your homework and that you're getting some sensitivity readers in there and that you're
I was
really
just gonna
addressing
say
it
that.
properly.
Yep.
Yeah, because if you don't know something, especially if it's real, if it has real world impact on actual people, then you need to do the proper research.
Right. I agree. Um, at the same time, I mean, because there are people who will, when it comes to diversity writing, and diversity in books, that will tell you you can't, that if
Mm-hmm.
that you can't write it. And I have been in groups where there's been discussion going on where authors who even deign to risk
Mm-hmm.
saying, well, shouldn't a writer be able to write whatever they want, provided they do it respectfully and they get the sensitivity readers that that
Mm-hmm.
that we had discussed? Could you do it? And I've watched them be eviscerated. You
I
know,
think you
I
can write
so I
whatever you want, but I think there are some stories that are not yours to tell.
yes, I
So if
agree.
like you could write it, like for you could write something that is somebody else's story. For example, I think I've mentioned this before. I have a character in one of my books who I really want to write. He's a black vampire who was turned in the 1800s, so at the time of slavery. So he experienced that in America, in this country. And that would be a really amazing visceral story to tell. But I'm not a black man who has the ancestral history of slavery and generational trauma. And I just, as much as I would love to tell his story, I just don't think it's my place to tell it.
Right.
And that's where I think the line is. I think having
Right.
him in my books as a full-fledged character is very important, but telling that specific story that is very much drenched in real world history is just not mine.
Right. I mean,
That's where I
you
think the
know,
line is.
so I agree that
Mhm.
there is a line, and I think when it comes to writing characters that are diverse, you have to make sure that you really, really school yourself so that you don't write the stereotype, you know,
Mhm.
because that's the other thing that is just completely wrong, is that you don't write
Mhm.
the stereotype. Um, but to say, you know, only write what you know, that would be like me saying
It's too limiting.
I could only write, uh, people who were born and raised in New York of Italian descent, you know.
Right,
So what does that
exactly.
leave me? Mafia? I mean, it's like serious, you know, it's like, construction workers,
Right.
it's like it's the Italian mama with the big wooden spoon, you know.
Yeah.
It's like I know.
The sauce
So
on Sundays.
yeah. So we called
Yeah,
it
no.
gravy.
Oh, don't start with me on that. Oh my God, that
The gravy
conversation.
versus sauce
We could have a
controversy.
podcast on sauce versus gravy. It would have nothing to do with writing, but it would be a great argument. But
Okay.
let me skip that because we don't want to go there. And number 10, the last one. Writers are introverts.
I would have to say yes and no
Yeah,
with
a
that.
lot of these are yes and no.
Yes, there are a lot of writers who are introverts to
Hmm.
the point where the idea of going to a writer reader event just makes them break out in hives and hyperventilate.
Yeah.
Um, then there are people who are like Tina and I, who are extroverted introverts.
The fake it till you
We've
make it.
Yes, absolutely. Who will, can be bigger than life and bolder than life in our, when we're quote unquote on at reader
Hmm.
events because our characters are bigger than life and bolder than life.
Right.
Um, but then we go back to our rooms and we sob on our beds. Curl up in a little ball on our beds and say, "Don't talk to me for an hour," that type of a thing, because we have to recharge. And
Yep.
that's why at the end of every reader writer conference that I go to, like a convention, if it's like a 4-day event, it takes me 2 weeks to recuperate after
Yeah.
that, at
Yep.
a minimum.
I
So,
think that this myth comes from the idea that like writing lends itself to an introverted personality because writers are in their head so much. We're constantly thinking about story, whereas sometimes when people are talking to us, we're just thinking about our books, that kind of a thing. So it lends to the introvert personality. But I've certainly known extroverted writers that are actually larger than life. We're just kind of playing at the game of being larger than life, and who have huge personalities, and I admire them for that. But they are definitely extroverted people, so I don't think you have to be an introvert to be a writer.
no, I don't think you have to be an introvert to be a writer. I mean, I would qualify you and I as having larger than life personalities because
Oh yeah.
we both have very strong opinions on things,
Hmm.
most of which we agree. So,
That's true.
um, but there are, and I think, in that respect, you kind of need that little bit of ego because that's
Hmm.
basically what it is. You need it in order to be able to to use an old word, interface with readers, to be able to
Right.
interact with readers and so forth. You have to
Right.
have that level of confidence. And even if does get pushed to the max, where it's like you fake it till you make it, that type
Hmm.
of a thing, um, that comes from someplace inside too, where
Yeah.
that little kernel of extroverted uh,
I think
need and
that the
want
difference
live.
between like the real difference between an extrovert and introvert is where we can be very extroverted and animated and enjoy that time, like genuinely enjoy
Yeah,
being on and interacting with readers. I think the difference is that's not where we get our energy from, right? Afterwards, you said we have to go and recover. We have to be alone for a while. We can't talk to people because it's too much. Our
right.
energy is from being alone. We're an extrovert who goes into that situation will just get energized by that and thrive off of that and be like awesome afterwards. So I think it's where the energy is derived from more so
Yeah.
than like maybe the personality, if that makes
I
sense.
agree with that. I mean, there are times when I do feed off energy in a room where
Oh, it's
there's a lot of
fun.
people having a good time and I'm in the middle of
Mm-hmm.
having a good time, especially if it's light and it's full of laughter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because then you come back and you actually, that kind of a interaction where it's just people are just excited and happy to be there and are laughing and just having a wonderful time. That kind of energy fills you because
Yeah.
it's not heavy, you know. But if you're in a room where this everybody's stressed and I,
Mm.
having to do this and having to do that,
It's a
it's
lot.
wearing. It's
Yeah.
wearing, you know. It's like being in a room of energy vampires, you know.
Right.
So
The best advice I could give for someone who is truly introverted and a writer and wanting to interact with their readers like that in a group setting is just to know your limits and know, what you're going to be comfortable with and what you're not going to be
right.
comfortable with. Finding other people there who are introverted as well, who maybe, are a little bit quieter or are going to need that break from like the big energy type things and will go off and get a cup of coffee or tea with you. Like that's going to make the difference in your experience. But I would say also don't be afraid to do it. I, I've always been a little bit of a ham. So I've always had some of that energy, but I will say that being in front of, a lecture hall as a professor or as a classroom teacher, and especially being in front of teenagers, you kind of lose a little bit of that because you have to you have to fake it till you make it at that point. Really
Yeah.
helped me. So practicing being in Zoom settings is really comfortable. So where you're in your house and you're in your safe space, but you're having to interact with people can push you to those limits, because I do know that it's especially hard for introverts to be in those big conferences.
I also think it's the more you do, the more you will become acclimated to it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
good. That's true.
and so it's not that it desensitizes you, but it's like you know what to expect. It becomes a
Mm-hmm.
demon you know rather than a demon you don't.
Yeah.
And the only other advice I could add to Tina's with that is practice your pitches, your spiels.
Mm,
If somebody's asking you about, especially if it's a book signing, if you have your book and it's right there in front of the readers and they come by, you have to interact with them. You have
right.
to,
What's your book about?
yeah, yeah. If somebody says, you say, what do you like to read? And they say anything. And is there anything here that's catching your eye that you would like me to tell you about? Have your pitch down, have your spiel
Mm-hmm.
down. You have your 5 second, your 10 second, your 15 second, know what you want to say so that you're not struggling.
Yeah.
You're not tripping over your words and you sound like, well, basically an idiot. So, I
No,
have
that's
had
good advice.
I've had to apologize for when I don't have it set in my head what I want to say about my books. And I
Sure.
always turn around and say, I'm so much better with the written word than the spoken. Please believe me. So, and making light of it, a little self-deprecation goes a long way, you know.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we tackled it. Top 10 writing myths now dispelled. If you have any more for us, make sure to leave them in the comments. We'd love to talk more about writing myths. And make sure to tune in next week as we talk more on Bound by Books. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.